When you look at a log like this, all the black ink is just regular training missions. And then the different color ink, red in this case, is combat time. So most of my time in the Hornet was combat flights instead of just to and from flights or training flights in the United States. The first time I was ever shot at, it was March 20th, 2003. That was the mission with the funny looking clouds. I was trying to figure out why those clouds look so awkward, and oh, there's another awkward looking cloud, and then realized that it was AAA exploding next to the jet. Because you don't hear the boom or anything like that. It's just there's a cloud, there's a cloud. Then you realize like, oh. And then the war kicked off. And then it was Operation Iraqi Freedom from then. I was raised by a single mom that didn't graduate high school. My mom did everything that she could, to raise a rambunctious little boy by herself. And when I was 13 years old, she unexpectedly passed away from a brain aneurysm. I struggled with losing my mom for a long time. I was just a ship adrift. It was the moment in my life that dictated a lot of my future. I just wanted to be something. So I enlisted in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps provided everything I needed as a young 18-year-old without a rudder or a sail. And it was from that moment on that confidence just started building, and I started looking at areas where I could, excel and succeed and things like that, and found them relatively quickly in the Marine Corps. So I was initially a communicator. I was a radio operator and then also a multi-channel and microwave radio operator. My first duty station was Marine Corps Air Station El Toro, which no longer exists, in Orange County, California. My first enlistment didn't include too much craziness. I went to the field quite a bit in the desert in Southern California and Arizona and places like that. As a young Marine, you're always looking to prove yourself, and proving yourself as a Marine, the standard is combat. And in my mind, I was thinking, when is my time going to present itself to prove myself as a Marine, as a man, and things like that. And now fast forward, I finish college. I get commissioned. I'm commissioned a ground officer. And while I'm at the basic school, where all Marine officers have to go for 6 months, I was selected for an aviation contract. I didn't want to go to flight school. I wanted to be, in my mind, I was thinking about being a Marine infantry officer and having a platoon of Marines and doing what Marine officers do. And I talked to my boss about it, and he says, you're physically capable, you're mentally capable, you're going to flight school. Well, if I'm going to be in the aviation community, what platform do I want? At the time, the F-18, in my mind, was the best platform.
The F-18 has seized center stage as the world's elite strike fighter.
I was an F-18 Wisdom, so backseat on an F-18. While I was in flight school, airborne down over Key West, 9/11 occurred. And it was very obvious we were going to war right after that.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
It was just over 90 minutes beyond President Bush's deadline for Saddam Hussein to leave Iraq that U.S. warships and planes, there were F-117 stealth bombers involved, launched the opening salvo of Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Fast-tracked through flight school and the F-18 Hornet RAG, as we call it, because they knew Operation Iraqi Freedom was going to start. And so I joined my first squadron and got sent to the Middle East. And I was actually overhead Iraq when Operation Iraqi Freedom kicked off. The first mission of Operation Iraqi Freedom, which I wasn't planning on it being the first mission that I was in for Operation Iraqi Freedom, was actually a reconnaissance mission over a place called Basra in southern Iraq. I remember looking out the canopy and looking at this cloud and thinking, that's a funny looking cloud. And then looking out the other side of the canopy and that's also a funny looking cloud. And both Chad and I realized at the same time that we were being shot at. That was AAA blowing up. And so we did the oh, shit moment that you do the first time you're ever shot at, and defended and all that stuff, and completed the mission, but then made our way back to, we were flying out of Kuwait at the time, so landed, got out of the jet, the crew, the ground crew members were there, and they said, hey, the war's kicked off. And for me, I always reflect on that and just think, you know, that's important information. And it's not like we didn't have radios. Somebody could have called and said, hey, just so you know, this conflict is active now. Then it was on. So then, you know, things changed and we were striking targets and doing all sorts of things because now it's an active war. I think it's funny because I was airborne when 9/11 occurred, and then I was airborne over Iraq when OIF kicked off. And both of those experiences were very, very surreal. I say I was lucky enough to see what happens when you take the leash off of our military, especially the Marine Corps, and see what they're truly capable of. And I'm very, very happy that I was on our side of that. Soldiers are pushing their way north through out of Kuwait into Iraq on their way to Baghdad. And so the missions that I was supporting initially turned into strike missions. So we were penetrating way into Iraq to strike key targets that could impede this progress. We made our way through that country very, very quickly with the ground troops and attained the objectives that we were trying to obtain. And the F-18s were very expensive to have in the Middle East, and so one of the first things that they did was, you know, we quote unquote won the war. We're gonna send all these assets home that don't need to be here. So we were one of the first folks that were sent home after the kickoff of that conflict. And it was early in the next year where I was based in San Diego, California, and I'm watching the news and I'm watching Marines try and push their way through Fallujah and other things like that, and the Marines are getting killed and injured, and I'm sitting in sunny Southern California. It just doesn't seem right. And so I went to my boss and said, you know, I don't know if there's going to be an opportunity, but I don't feel comfortable sitting at home while there's a war going on, and so if I could put my name in the hat to go back, I'll do it. And again, kind of careful what you wish for, because they were sending an F-18 squadron back. Very different experience than the first time, because I got to support the Fallujah campaign, and we were developing close air support urban CAS in real time while we were executing that mission. And then I came back from that deployment, actually deployed to the Far East for a while. I do know that I was there in 2003, 2004, 5, 6, and 7 in the Hornet, which was nice for my tax returns because I got a tax break. I really like to do my job, and so if there's a war going on, for me, it just felt like I should be contributing. And on my last deployment in the F-18, I knew I was gonna be coming home and I'm gonna be executing orders, and so I was looking for things that I wanted to do, missions that I wanted to be a part of. And that year, a colleague of mine was a part of DevGru, a part of SEAL Team 6. People know who that is now, so the SEAL contingent. And he was working with them as a forward air controller, JTAC, as we call them too. What was happening in parallel while I was trying to get this assignment was the Marine Corps was creating Marine Special Operations Command. Before I left Iraq, I actually got orders to be a plank holder or an original member of Marine Special Operations Command for their West Coast battalion. And then, so I was part of the battalion and then ended up becoming part of the 1st Delta Company to deploy with that unit. I was always trying to strive for what I considered the best. So when I was going aviation, I wanted the F-18. I thought that was the best platform. If I was going back to the ground, I like the Force Reconnaissance community or Marine Special Operations community, Navy SEAL community. Like, these are the elites in many people's minds. How can I contribute my talents and strive to be the best version of myself and support in the best way? And that was the way I saw it. And so I strived to be a part of that, and somehow they let me in. We were really trying to figure out what Marine Special Operations was going to be. How are we going to contribute to this mission in a unique Marine Corps way? I came in, got my qualifications as a JTAC, then quickly became an instructor, one of the first Special Operations JTAC instructors in the Marine Corps. And then we deployed to Afghanistan, Western Afghanistan, well, Helmand and to the west. In Afghanistan, we were split up across that area and started executing missions in Western Afghanistan. And some of the biggest things that we were doing was hunting down Taliban leadership and those that were training IED emplacement. A JTAC, Joint Terminal Air Controller, is the person that's controlling and coordinating aviation assets on the ground.
Bomb on target, best weapon to target match.
And it's not just as simple as, hey, there's a F-18 or a helicopter or something like that, and you're controlling their strikes or deconflicting the target from friendly forces. You're going to make a decision on how to weaponize that target, like which assets are you going to use, which assets are you going to request, and how are you going to control them in that space. And that's why the Marines use a lot of aviators to do this. You come prepared with thinking in 3 dimensions, and you're used to working in a very, very dynamic environment. We were, encroaching on a village that there were some Taliban in and some folks that were training IED emplacers, and we had a small team that was encroaching on that village, and we ended up getting into a big firefight with them, and we were in a fight, like we could see the guys, and a B-1 bomber checked in on station, which just could carry everything. And so as we were clearing through that village, these guys removed themselves from the village and the potential for collateral damage. So I coordinated a strike on those guys, which ultimately ended the conflict. He dropped enough to ensure that the target was eliminated, that's for sure. The vibration and concussion through the village from those strikes hits you right in the chest. After that deployment, I rotated out of that unit. It was definitely the end of my sexy time, as I call it, fighter squadrons and special operations. And the Marine Corps sent me back to school. So they sent me to get an advanced degree. And then after I got that advanced degree, I was assigned the job of running a schoolhouse in North Carolina, which is not as dynamic as F-18s and special operations, but it was a nice twilight tour. I made the decision to retire after 23 years. I very, very much cherish and value my military experience. I I owe my life to the Marine Corps. Everything I have is because of my service in the Marine Corps and to the nation. And so I'm incredibly grateful for that, and will forever be grateful for that. But what it has done is it's set me up to continue to create an impact in areas that I value. Now I'm doing that in a different way. When an individual dons the cloth of our nation and swears an oath to the Constitution, we as a collective make a promise to that individual that should they fall in battle, we'll do everything that we can to return them to their families and the nation. And that promise doesn't have an expiration date. So Project Recover focuses our efforts on researching, searching for, documenting MIA sites, and conducting recovery of MIA sites to repatriate Americans that are still missing in action. There's a difference between somebody that's killed in action and somebody that goes missing. But when an MIA goes missing and they're likely killed, the family still holds on to hope. And what that does is it interrupts the grieving process. And so that family holds on to that loss for generation to generation to generation. Many times these family members that have been lost are in this mythical status, and there's all sorts of stories that are made up about them. But now they actually have the truth. The myth is no longer a myth, it's a hero. Project Recover is the only fully vertical organization, non-government organization, that does research, search missions, documentation missions, and recovery missions in both the land environment as well as the ocean environment. We've done more than 70 missions, and we've executed those missions in more than 20 countries. We've been to 21 countries now. We've documented or located sites associated with close to 300 missing Americans. I first became involved with Project Recover in 2004. I went on my first mission in 2007, and from then on, I was hooked to the mission. Grew within the organization, became a team leader, became a board member as the nonprofit grew, and then in 2019 became the president and CEO of the organization. This is a B-24 that Project Recover located in 2004, and 8 of the crew were repatriated from this aircraft. And one of the biggest discoveries, especially early on, for Project Recover, and this is just a beautiful painting that Mark did. And when I was 18 years old, that kid without a rudder or sail, my sphere of influence was barely myself. And now that sphere kind of wraps around the world in all sorts of different ways, definitely across this country. When I look back on my life in the Marine Corps and then into Project Recover and other areas where I put energy into for my life, it kind of all supports this personal mission statement that I've developed. And that mission statement is, I want to have a positive impact on as many people as I can throughout my lifetime. And I'm going to continue to look to see where I can make a difference in a positive way in my community, in our nation, in the world, and I'll do it for the rest of my days.